Tonight, the State of the Union.
The President of the United States.
The President's big speech in front of a divided Congress, moments away, plus apocalyptic anguish.
A whole family of my cousin, his wife, his daughter, and his son, all of them died.
Thousands dead amid screams for help from under the rubble as rescuers race against the clock in the wake of a massive earthquake rocking Turkey and Syria. And a master violinist retells the story of Ezekiel's Valley of the Dry Bones. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. From abortion to the economy to infrastructure, President Biden prepares to address the nation. Good evening in our nation's capital. I'm Jenna Browder. In just a few hours, the president will deliver the State of the Union address. And for the first time in his presidency, he'll speak to a divided Congress. Biden is expected to declare the State of the Union is strong and make the case that he should get the credit for that. The CBN News White House correspondent Abigail Robertson is at the White House tonight as we count down to the 9 o'clock hour. Abigail?
Jenna, while the president hasn't officially announced whether or not he's seeking re-election, many speculate that tonight could be a preview of his 2024 campaign.
I talk to the American people and let them know the state of affairs, what's going on.
A major theme of the speech will be Biden's economic progress, an issue he highlighted last week to the DNC.
We created more new jobs in 2 years than any president did in their entire term.
Despite positive job growth and unemployment numbers, Biden's poll numbers are troubling. An ABC Washington Post poll shows 41% of Americans believe they are worse off financially since Biden took office.
As long as the economy, there's uncertainty with the economy, or people don't feel great about the economy, where both President Biden and the Democratic Party are on very uncertain ground heading into 2024.
And bad news polls so far in 2023 don't stop there. According to NBC, 71% of respondents say America is heading in the wrong direction, with 42% saying Biden has brought the wrong kind of change to America. And the Associated Press finds 37% of Democrats don't want Biden seeking a second term.
Right now in his term, he's about where Gerald Ford was, Jimmy Carter was, and Ronald Reagan was at this point in their terms, which is a whole myriad of options because Gerald Ford lost in the primary, Jimmy Carter lost in the general election, and Reagan went on to be reelected. So there are a lot of options about what could happen in 2024 based on what we're seeing right now.
Nathan Gonzalez from Inside Elections tells CBN News he expects Biden's speech to look to the future.
I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a president who's going to tout what he's done. And I do think this will be a blueprint for a reelection effort if he indeed announces a run. I think he's going to talk about job creation and unemployment and paint a picture to the American people of why he should be rehired if he decides to go that route.
The White House says the speech will also focus on unity, laying out 4 areas President Biden believes both parties can come together on: ending cancer, supporting America's veterans, tackling the mental health crisis, and beating the opioid and overdose epidemic. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders will give the GOP response to Biden's address tonight, and Republican lawmakers say they would like President Biden to speak to the border crisis, inflation, and national security issues. Jenna?
All right, at the White House, CBN News White House correspondent Abigail Robertson. Well, members of Congress are lining up to give their takes on what the president will or won't say tonight. Republicans hammering Biden on the economy, Democrats focusing on his legislative wins. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka is on Capitol Hill. Matt, what are we hearing ahead of the president's speech tonight?
Well, Jenna, there's certainly not a lack of material out there. As you just heard from Abigail, when House Republicans took control of the chamber, they wasted little time bringing issues like the southern border, the economy, the president's handling of the classified document situation, all of those issues to the forefront. And of course, just this past week, heading into tonight's speech, many of us had our eyes fixed on the sky as we watched the Chinese spy balloon drama play out. Well, House Republicans have already started hitting the president on all of those issues in a sort of pre-buttal to the speech tonight, having a media blitz yesterday and today, with many saying that no matter what the president says tonight, it's spin.
and it's becoming more and more difficult for families to make ends meet, more and more difficult for small businesses to make ends meet as well. So while the president thinks he has numbers to tout, the average American family knows better, which is why they voted for House Republicans to have a change in leadership in Congress. And we're going to hold this president accountable.
What I want to hear from him is a plan for the southern border, a plan for Ukraine, a plan for China, a plan to defend our nation.
Now, of course, for Democrats, this speech tonight is more about accomplishments and optimisms, because in this past year, there have been a significant amount of bipartisan wins with gun control or infrastructure or the Chips and Science Act. And of course, just this past January, you had better than expected job numbers and 50-year lows in unemployment. Dems are certainly hoping that some of that good news can break through.
It's a track record of extraordinary accomplishment, and we'll share that continuously with the American people, not to say reward us, but to say trust us. We have your back.
But one thing to watch for will be the looming debt ceiling that could end up becoming a crisis, with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy saying he's still willing to negotiate with the president, but drawing a hard line, saying spending has to come down before the debt ceiling goes up.
No blank checks for runaway spending. Just sensible, responsible solutions to our growing national debt.
Now, that debt fight is expected to take up a lot of the conversation as we head into the summer, when the Treasury Department says we could end up defaulting on our debts if we don't raise that ceiling. But Speaker McCarthy did make a point that no matter what happens tonight, he's not going to rip up the president's speech or some of the theatrics we've seen in the past. He made it a point to say he respects the institution too much. Jenna?
Matt Galka on Capitol Hill. Thank you very much, Matt. And here now to discuss, CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. So, David, the president has yet to announce a re-election bid. Do you think tonight could be a test run?
You know, a lot of people are making this into some sort of test run. Look, I have to tell you, Jenna, I'm not quite convinced of that. I mean, I think with Joe Biden, it's one speech at a time for him. I mean, he has to lay out some sort of vision for the future. And if that translates into 2024, well, then so be it. But I think you'll see hints of that today. And I think, as Abby pointed out, you're going to see them talk about unity, where they can get stuff done for the country. And I think really that's his best play at this point, to somehow continue to preach that unity theme, even though we have seen from time and time again that from a rhetoric standpoint, the unity has not been there. Joe Biden has not been a unifying president when it comes to rhetoric, calling out the MAGA crew, if you will. So I think it's going to be tough sledding for him.
David, a recent NBC News poll shows 2/3 of voters have some reservations or are very uncomfortable with President Biden running for the White House again. AP poll, 37% of Democrats don't want him to run again. What are the chances you think Biden does not run?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think it's totally up in the air. I mean, as in 50-50. I mean, this idea that Biden's kind of a shoo-in to run, or at least he's kind of giving those indications, I don't buy it. As a matter of fact, if you talk to Democrat sources, they're hoping that he won't run. I mean, look, those poll numbers bear it out. 37% of Democrats don't want him to run. What a high, extraordinary number. And look, I think the only reason, and what in essence Democrats are saying here, is the reason they think that he could actually potentially run is because Trump is running. They think that Trump is good for business on the Democrat side. And if that's your only calling card, that's really, A, not a reason to run, and B, pretty dicey, especially if DeSantis and others get in the race.
Yeah. All right, David, we should point out that you and I will be hosting CBN's special State of the Union coverage tonight, a few minutes before 9 o'clock. The speech is at 9 o'clock, so we hope people will join us there. They can go to our website, the app, or I believe YouTube. David Brody, thank you so much. Looking forward to tonight.
Yeah, me too, Jenna. Thanks.
All right. And across the globe, a massive international rescue and aid effort is underway to help millions of people in Turkey and Syria. One day after the catastrophic 7.8 magnitude earthquake devastated the region, the death toll has now surpassed more than 7,000 and is still climbing. As CBN's Chris Mitchell reports, it's the worst natural disaster to hit the area in nearly a century.
The scenes are apocalyptic. The earthquake toppled thousands of buildings in the area, leaving millions without shelter. The death toll is now in the thousands, but could soar into the tens of thousands. Millions agonizing over lost or missing loved ones.
A whole family of my cousin, his wife, his daughter, and his son, all of them died. They were taken out from under the rubble after 8 hours.
Many are now living in tents.
My wife was terrified after the earthquakes, so we didn't want to go back home. Neither did my kids. Our family came here to stay in the shelter.
The pictures and videos on social media are heart-wrenching. This sister is protecting her brother as they're trapped together underneath the rubble. This father and son died together, with the father protecting his son. This baby was born, and then reportedly its mother died. The anguish of the people devastated has touched a global chord.
I think all of the world's thoughts and condolences are with the people in this region who are suffering at this time.
Dozens of nations, including Mexico, Holland, and Spain, have begun a massive aid effort to bring needed food, shelter, and medical supplies, as well as search and rescue teams to help people dig out of the rubble. USA Team 2 from Los Angeles is one of them.
So these men and women and these dogs of the LA County Fire Department are really going to go place themselves in harm's way to save lives, to dig people out, and to help with the recovery. So it's going to be a very dangerous mission. They're prepared, they're trained.
Israel is sending aid and an IDF team called Olive Branches. They flew out Monday night. And hundreds of volunteers, rescue workers, and NGO members rushed to Istanbul airport to join the effort. The good news is that so far, nearly 8,000 people have been rescued out of the rubble, like this little girl. It will now be a race against time to save many more. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Just heartbreaking and devastating. Well, back here in the U.S., the Navy is releasing the first detailed images showing the operation to recover pieces of the now infamous Chinese spy balloon. Take a look at these. The photos taken a day after the Pentagon shot down the balloon with a missile off the coast of South Carolina. The balloon's suspected surveillance device is huge, roughly as long as a regional jet. Coming up is the state of the nation, similar to before the Civil War. Why one prominent evangelical leader says yes when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. Ahead of tonight's State of the Union address, the president of the Family Research Council gave a speech of his own Monday. Tony Perkins delivering the state of faith, family, and freedom in Washington.
Probably the only point that we can reference that is close is where our nation was when Abraham Lincoln was alive. And I thought of Mr. Lincoln's House Divided speech that he gave back in 1858 when our nation was bitterly divided over the issue of slavery. And he quoted the Bible when he said this. He said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand."
And Tony joins us now. Tony, welcome. So you say our nation is probably as divided as it's ever been since just before the Civil War. What makes you say that? That's a pretty strong statement.
Well, when you look at what's happening across the country where you have states that are deciding that they're going to protect the sanctity of human life, you have other states that are saying, no, we're going to pay for it all the way up until the birth of a child. We have states that are protecting children from experimental surgeries that would mutilate their bodies. We have other states saying we're going to be a sanctuary where those kids who want to change their sex, they can come to our states. And so we see ourselves divided over that. You can call it red, you can call it blue, you can call it right, you can call it wrong. But the interesting thing in terms of comparison to where we were in 1858, 1860, going into the Civil War, that Abraham Lincoln wanted to preserve the Union, but he knew that he couldn't preserve it based upon a lie, based upon ignoring the truth. He realized that the only way to have lasting unity was to have truth, and he stood for that even in the face of a divided nation where we went through a civil war. And I think ideologically we are divided. But I think there are those who understand that we have to stand for the truth. We have to protect our children. We have to protect our religious freedom. And quite frankly, what I see happening is encouraging, because we see states, we see Americans, we see moms and dads who, they're no longer waiting for Washington, D.C. They're moving forward to preserve this country of ours.
You know, Tony, how do you think we become a united nation, again, when so many people have, you know, what they would say it's a different, they have their version of the truth?
Well, therein lies the problem, and I think the way forward, as it was in Abraham Lincoln's day, is that, especially for Christians, this is where we need to share the gospel, the news, the good news, and rebuild our communities, beginning in our homes, on the truth of God. I don't think as Christians we can shrink back, even though we're a pluralistic and increasingly secular society, that somehow we have to feel like the Word of God, biblical truth, is no longer applicable to our life. Even more so than ever in our national life, we need to have the truth. And the only way it's going to make an appearance is with us living it out in an authentic way and not being fearful, not shrinking back, and being silent.
All right, Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council. It's always good to have you on the show. Tony, thank you so much.
Great to be with you. Have a great day.
You too. Well, a master violinist is retelling an age-old story. What a 2,500-year-old prophecy reveals. Next on Faith Nation. A Kingdom of God perspective. That's what one renowned composer and violinist hopes her music can help people capture. She's doing it with a musical retelling of Ezekiel's Valley of the Dry Bones, revealing a 2,500-year-old prophecy about Israel. Paul Strand has the story from Jerusalem.
World-class violinist and composer Ruth Fazell felt the Lord told her to explore Ezekiel 37's story of the Valley of the Dry Bones. In it, God breathes life into skeletons of long-dead warriors and puts flesh back onto them. God also showed Fazell how this chapter is about more than that valley and those bones. As God says in verse 11, "Son of man, these are the bones of the people of Israel."
I discovered things. I said, whoa, I didn't realize God said that.
This revelation led Fazell to compose and produce a 45-minute musical film entitled Ezekiel Out of Exile. Since the story is really about all God's chosen people of Israel, the film opens with the many disasters that have afflicted Jews across the ages, from the Babylonian captivity to being scattered and exiled, up to the horror of the Holocaust. And that's how the exiled, beaten down Jewish people became like that valley of dry and half-buried bones.
The whole time of exile is, I think, in Jewish thinking, is very much, it was like a grave. They were the graves.
In the valley, God tells Ezekiel to prophesy life into those bones and graves, just as in the film we see the land of Israel resurrected from desert to lush landscapes. Up from the grave, the bones became mighty Israelites. Fazell points out this was God prophesying the Jews would revive, rise, return, and resurrect the nation of Israel itself. As the Lord said in verses 12 and 14,
"And I will bring you back to the land of Israel. I will settle you in your own land." They came up from the graves of the Holocaust, and out of that we see the fulfillment. I just think it's the most marvelous expression of God's heart for his people. So it's all about looking and seeing what God's doing and what he's fulfilling. I want to say to all of Israel, look what God has promised you. You know, look what he said.
And that was Paul Strand reporting. Thank you, Paul. All aboard the cutest carpool still ahead when Faith Nation returns.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
And finally tonight, a dog walking business in Alaska has gone viral after its owners shared their unique pickup routine. Mo and her husband started Mo Mountain Mutts with just a handful of dogs. But before they knew it, they had a whole crew of dogs by their side, and they needed a way to transport all of them to nearby walking trails. Now the couple shuttles dogs around in their so-called puppy bus, and the dogs, well, they seem to be on board with the new addition.
Good morning, Amaru. Hey, you're not buckled in.
Good morning, Bama.
And the dogs, they get to pick their own seats, which include special safety harnesses for each and, of course, plenty of treats to go around. And that's going to do it for Faith Nation tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. And as I mentioned earlier, David Brody and I will be hosting our State of the Union coverage, so we'll see you over on cbnnews.com.